Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello Internet, we are back. I'm excited, I must tell you. To me, when I listen to Colonel voice, Vernon voice, I actually understand what legacy is about. When we started it 5 years ago, we wanted people to tell their story, so that there's a legacy behind them, and that also other people, strangers and those also friends, everybody else can come and listen and understand where the man comes from and how they think about it and what was behind whatever they did or didn't do. It's a fascinating story, and there will be quite a few videos. So let's enjoy this one. This is episode 2. Now you will remember in episode 1 he actually is about his childhood. The loss of his father was a SAAF navigator in a dreadful accident. And I must tell you something strange happened there. You wouldn't believe, the very same day that he recorded that, I was speaking to a very senior colonel, much older, a previous generation. We still have to record about the Eland Panzer car and Reconnaissance. It's Colonel John French, a wonderful man. And I started talking to the colonel, and I don't know how he got to, but he said he had a friend. And sadly, the friend died in a Buccaneer accident in 1973. One of his best friends. And Vernon was sitting across me, and I put the colonel on speaker mode, and it turned out that this friend of Colonel John French, who died, the pilot, was actually the pilot in the same aircraft on the same day, same incident where Vernon's dad died as the navigator in that very same aircraft. Guys, it's a magic of legacy. That's how it is. I mean, if you ever attend some of our functions which we have in South Africa, whenever we're there, you will find people meeting each other who hasn't seen each other, and you will find out the military world is damn small. It's really small. That is why if people want to come here and claim to be in special forces or whatever, they just won't get away with it. There's no way they're going to get away with it. But anyway, so we have episode 1, and it's for his childhood, and then he ends up in the SAAF as a permanent force member, goes through the ranks, which says something, and then he joins 5 Squadron, which was flying Impalas, as I'm told. And there he, of course, walks into the RSM, which was the old school RSMs. Anyway, so that's the story of the first video. It's really good. If you haven't seen it, please go back and look at it. It's worth your while. And now the story continues. So I want to say again, thank you to Colonel Voice. We're really grateful for you. We're grateful for your time. Grateful that you actually came to Phuket and spent some time with Rebecca and myself here. We had a fantastically good time here. Yeah, we did all the things, and now we're recording, man. So that's it. Over to the Colonel.
Yes, we ended off where I had just flown to Klangebaan and joined 7 Squadron, aka 5 Squadron. Just by the wayside, Koos asked me just to tell you a bit more about 5 Squadron. 5 Squadron was actually based in Durban for many years. It's a squadron that dates back to the Second World War. They were known as number 5 Chaka Squadron because of their Natal heritage, I suppose. And by the time I had joined the squadron and the 2 squadrons had merged into 7 Squadron, the squadron was operating Impala Mark II and Impala Mark I aircraft. For those not familiar with it, the international name is the MAGI MB326B and MB326KC. The KC was the Mark II version, the single seat, and the Mark I version was the dual seat. Okay, the confusion between Mark I and Mark II is not to do with the number of seats. The Mark I was actually the first aircraft that the Air Force bought back in, I think it was about the 1965-66, when we had a license production to produce a number of Impala Mark I aircraft ab initio trainers for the Air Force. Being ab initio trainers, they were all 2 seats. Okay, so they became the Impala Mark 1. A few years later, the Air Force decided to buy a counter-insurgency and light attack aircraft based on the Impala Mark II, which was based on the Impala Mark 1, sorry, which became the Impala Mark II, which is a single-seater. Okay, so I know many people get confused between Mark 1 and Mark II, but just remember Mark 1, 2 seats, Mark II, 1 seat, single-seater light attack aircraft. Okay. So at 7th Squadron, after our first day, as what I mentioned in the previous video, we had a bit of a run-in with the Regimental Sergeant Major. He got to us. We had a bit of a straff PT late in the afternoon because we weren't drilling on the base and not walking according to standard, which he had given. The day ended with us going to the mess. We booked into the Airman and Privates mess at Langebaan, where we were given our rooms. I was set up with a Lance Corporal, or I think a corporal at that stage. I can't remember his name, I think. I know his surname was Bester. I can't remember. Marius Bester. I think he was a telecoms operator. So we shared a room, not much different from the setup which we had in the Air Force Gymnasium. Although the room was a lot better. There were 2 rooms to the sides of us, and it was a communal shower, which we'd been used to during regimental training, also spending time in a communal shower. Okay. I think the first time I actually had a private shower in the military, staying in military accommodation, was after doing officer's course. But up until then, most of my career, it was communal showers, which we used to use. So Marius had been at the base for a year or 2 already, so he knew the ropes. Being a new private or airman at that stage at Langebaan, during lunchtime we actually had to, for the first week or 2, the Regimental Sergeant Major or the PTIs had decided that all new recruits will eat in dress number 1 when we go for lunch. So it was a bit of a nightmare going down to lunch, working in dress number 4, going upstairs, changing into your tunic and tie, going downstairs, having a quick lunch, going back, getting back into dress number 4. But anyway, that was only for 2 weeks. What we did not know is that every Thursday, Gibbs Gerber used to have a inspection. Once again, we also thought, well, we're in the real military now, we don't stand inspections anymore. Well, the RSM at the base, he rules with the iron fist. And as Koos also said in one of his previous intro videos, or the conclusion video previous for video number 1, you really looked up to him, and they really used to send the fear into you, which you can't believe. But deep down, I think they were all very well-hearted and gentlemen back home. But working with the troops, it is the way they operated. So we quickly found out that Thursdays we will be standing an inspection. Now, Langebaan at the Airman's Mess used to have a long row of acorn akkerbome, which used to throw off leaves terribly in this long lane that used to go down to the main entrance. I was staying on the 2nd floor, and I didn't have any brasso, and the Thursday morning, Gibbs and the PTI came running in during inspection and wanted to know why we didn't wash the windows on the outside. Well, we were on the 2nd floor, there were no ladders outside. So basically, he told us, well, then you just hang out of the window and you clean it, okay? And I want the brasso knips done as well. So we found a little way to clean the windows on the outside on the 2nd floor. It was risky, but anyway, we done it. After the inspections on a Thursday, he used to send us on an obstacle course through the base. We used to do our little 2.4 kilometer run. And then from there, we also used to run wherever we wanted to be on the base. If we weren't in a flight, we used to run. Sometimes if we were in a flight, we used to almost be at the jogging pace, going where we needed to go. My first day at 7th Squadron was a bit daunting as well. I just joined the squadron. Most of the pilots from 5 Squadron were all guys in the Impala line that actually knew a lot of the 7th Squadron guys. Our squadron commander was Commandant Bart Houtfleisch. He retired as a brigadier general a few years later. He also had an illustrious career in the Air Force. And then the ops officer was a gentleman with the name of Willem Marais. He was a lieutenant at that stage. He was working in the ops room. I think Major Bob Grinnell, also retired Air Force pilot. I think he's in Australia right now. He was the ops officer, come flight commander, looking after training. And then there were a whole lot of other second lieutenants at the squadron. My first day, never having any ops training, never been exposed to this. Remember, this is my first day at the operational squadron. I actually got to work, and there was a Corporal Brunt, who was the ops clerk, and she basically just looked at me, asked me, what am I doing? And she gave me a very brief overview of the ops room, and it was solo after that. Literally, the brief consisted of, in the mornings, as the ops clerk, you make sure that the flight authorization sheets are completed. All the flight cards, we used to have these little flight cards that used to be handed to the pilots on their missions. This was their takeoff time, the landing time, the route, the call signs if they had some basic information, a small little flight card that they could put into their knee pocket in their overalls. With some basic information on the flight. That used to be prepared, make sure the authorization sheet is signed for the day. And then during the day, it used to be just liaising with the logistics people and the technicians on the aircraft configurations, how much fuel in the aircraft, how much fuel in the tip tanks, how much in the main auxiliary or the drop tanks which we used to carry, any weapons, if they were doing weapons training, what rocket pods, what gun pods, what the ammunition load was, and if we're doing tactical reconnaissance, the configuration of the aircraft with the F-95 tactical reconnaissance pod. So basically that was morning duty, is just to make sure that all the aircraft are configured correctly, liaise with the maintenance guys to make sure that the flights are good, aircraft serviceability is done. And then usually here by 9 o'clock, the first waves of aircraft used to start going on their training sorties. The squadron, as I say, 7th Squadron was operating Impala Mark 1 and Mark 2s. We had a couple of unique Mark 1s that had just been camouflaged. Each Impala squadron rotated Impalas up to the Southwest Africa air bases up at Ondangwa and Rundu. I don't think the guys ever flew out of Squadron, but Ondangwa and Rundu, and then at Mapacha and Katiba Malilo, there used to be a permanent rotation of Impala Mark 1s that were used for Telstar, and these aircraft were usually in a camouflaged scheme, and then supported other aircraft in Telstar operations. They mainly make Impala Mark 2s, which were used for light attack, counterinsurgency, and tactical reconnaissance missions. So yeah, we had 2 or 3 aircraft that were camouflaged for Telstar duties and other liaison flights between the bases in Namibia, or which now is known as Namibia. At that time it was Southwest Africa. From there, during the day, we used to liaise as the ops clerk. One of your duties basically used to be to liaise with the base command post, to inform them of the flying schedule and any changes to the flying schedule, crew changes, and aircraft changes. And then also for our flights outside the Langebaalberg training area, we used to have to submit flight plans via the AFTN system, which is the Airfield Fixed Telecommunications Network, which is a network which all flight plan data is sent throughout the country, and for that matter, throughout the world. So one of the duties as the ops clerk as well was to complete the flight plans and then take this up to the control tower and hand it to the ATC over there. As what things happen at the squadron, weather changes, aircraft changes, and all this type of stuff. So a couple of times the general rule used to be from the chief air traffic controller. It was a lady, I think she was a Captain Miller or Major Miller. I think her husband was a pilot at the 83 Jet Flying School. It always used to be a hassle. We used to come up with the flight plans, and they wanted the flight plans at least 2 hours before the time. Unfortunately, at the squadron, it regularly happened that we as an ops clerk had to explain why the flight plans only arrived a half an hour early. instead of 2 hours before the time, but that was mainly due to stuff outside our control as ops clerks. So we just handed the flight plans, fill in the flight plan, I'm flying here, pilot used to sign it, and we used to take our little jog up to the control tower. At the end of the first day, I got told there's this document, a mayfly. Now, a mayfly is basically a signal which was sent from the squadron to the next higher headquarters, which in our case was the Southern Air Force Command Post at Silvermine, and also to Air Force headquarters. It basically just gave the status of the aircraft and the status of the crew, how many aircraft were available, how much mission-ready aircraft we had, how much partial mission-ready aircraft we had, how many crew was of the squadron, who was serviceable, who was sick, who was not. That basically just for them to be able to see how much aircraft you can put in the air and what the status of the air crew was. I also didn't have a clue what this mayfly document was that I'd been told about earlier this morning, as the ops clerk had left maybe around about 3 o'clock, and I was just told, but just submit the mayfly by 4 o'clock this afternoon. Fortunately, Billy Murray was a lieutenant at the squadron, he's the ops officer. He had an idea of where the file was. I'd never written a military signal in my life before, and I was just given this file, and he said, here's a thing, just do it the way it was done previously. And I spoke to the flight commanders, got the information, had to go speak to the technical guys to get the information. Luckily, they had it pre-formatted, so it was relatively easy, and off I went with my first mayfly that I had to write. Never written a signal in my life, didn't know what it was, and that was my introduction to the Air Force, this operations environment on the first day. Writing signals, getting mission numbers for aircraft, it was a bit of a challenge. This is before the Air Force went to personalized call signs in the fighter line. We were still using alphanumeric call signs, which used to be issued by Silvermine. So every time there was a mission, we had to phone the Silvermine ops clerk and tell them we've got an Impala Mark 1 or Mark 2 going to Toothrock to do air-to-ground training, and we want the call sign. Okay, there's the departure time and the expected landing time, and they'd give us a call sign like Alpha 22 Bravo, and then that would be in the tasking system. This is also before the Air Force had a electronic tasking system, which all the aircraft tasks were recorded on. So I had to figure that one out. It was just the telephone number. I didn't have a clue what to do. I think till today, I'm still waiting for a briefing on how to run an ops clerk or ops office in the Air Force. But fortunately, the pilots were very accommodating. The guys helped me quite a lot over the first few days. The ops clerk, which was there, didn't care much. To it was just, there's an extra person in the ops room, and he can sort it out. Okay. While at 7 Squadron, I also had my first opportunity to fly to Petersburg on a ferry flight. We were doing aircraft changeovers as part of the Air Force's 85 Command Flying School training system, where all the future fighter pilots were trained. We had seconded aircraft to the combat flying school. So I think the majority of the Impalas in the Air Force were, like every squadron had to send a couple of imps, and these aircraft were then used for training at 85 Combat Flying School of Petersburg, a unit which I would end up my career in the Air Force before going and becoming a staff officer. So I had my first flight in the imp up to Langebaan, from Langebaan. I think we flew from Langebaan to Uppington. I think we hopped to Waterkloof, and Waterkloof, Petersburg or something like that. We've done 2 landings. It's too long ago to remember. Up the one day and then back the next day. The squadron itself, when I was there, was mainly involved in training as well, being at Langebaanweg. We ran a type of operational training course, OTC, which is also presented at 85 Combat Flying School. I know we had a lot of guys going through for training. Whether it was a formal course in the Air Force facility, I really don't know, but we've done a lot of training. The squadron itself, the main stuff which we've done, as I say, GH and IF, just aircraft general handling and instrument flight training, mainly with the Impala Mark 1s. The Mark 1 had a little IF hood which used to be put into the aircraft to do instrument flying with the instructor. And then also we've done a lot of air-to-ground training at the Toothrock Weapons Range. From there, a lot of long navs. speaking about the navigations, we had 1 or 2 citizen force pilots that used to go and fly with us every Wednesday afternoon. They used to fly flights, mainly navigation flights, to George, do a let down at George, and then come back to Langebaanweg. Old gentleman, I can still see his face in front of me, but I can, for the love of me, I can't remember what his name was. I think it was Latergang. But anyway, an old guy had a farm somewhere in the Gebou area, which he farmed with apples and some other fruit. So he used to come and fly with us on a Wednesday afternoon. So the rest of the squadron, mainly training, very much focused on getting guys to the border. And then also we, on occasion, the pilots that were going through the squadron were basically went to do their 2-week rotations, either at Rundu or Mapacha. Okay. One of the funny incidents, being a new squadron, not knowing the politics between the fast jet guys and the helicopter guys and the transport guys, Commandant Halpfish came in after about being at the squadron for a week or 2. There was no pictures up on the walls. The squadron had just settled into, I think it was the CGI building at Langebaan, at the Flying Schools building. And he came to me the one day, being the ops clerk, you become the master, well, the jack of all trades and the master of none. And it was basically, the instruction was given to me, put up photos of pictures of aircraft. Okay, so I didn't know where to start. Luckily, there was a flight sergeant, I can't remember his surname as well, but there's the photographic section close to where we were. And I went to him and I said to him, Commandant wants photographs of aircraft. Okay. So he printed a lot of photographs, and over the one weekend, I went up and I put up these photographs in the passages and in the crew room. Monday morning, there was quite a commotion. Okay. I was the key orderly every day at the squadron, so I had to go and fetch the keys at the duty room and then go and open the squadron and make sure the squadron is ready for operations for the people to start working in the day. So lo and behold, the squadron commander comes walking in, and he comes towards the ops room, and he at times used to, as when he walked in, he used to come and sign the flights for the day, and we had a little wooden stand fitted against the wall with the day's authorization sheets on, and he saw the pictures out of the corner of his eye, but I don't think he noticed much of what had been on it. And as when he looked up at the wall in front of him, there was a photograph of the Voortrekker monument with a Super Freelon helicopter flying past the Voortrekker monument. Okay. He came into the ops room, a bit furious. He told me, what is this helicopter doing in the squadron? Okay. As when he walked down the passage, there were pictures of Harvards and C-130s and Dakotas, and I don't think there was any fighter pictures up on the walls that I can recall. We just had this one big picture in the lobby of a Impala Mark 1 flying in front of Table Mountain. Okay. The rest is all standard SAAF public relations pictures of everything but fighters. So I learned a bit of a lesson over there. In a fighter squadron, you put up fighter pictures, not of everything. Well, the instruction was put up pictures of aircraft. Like, he didn't tell me what aircraft to put up. So this flight sergeant printed a lot of photos, and I just put up the photos. Okay. A few weeks into my tour at 7 Squadron, we used to also, notwithstanding the fact that we had our normal duty at the squadron, we had to do guard duty as well. Okay, so for 1 week a month, we would do our normal day duty, and then in the evenings, at about 4 o'clock, 3:30, we would knock off from work and we'd go and report to the security squadron. And then from there, we would do guard duty. Okay. It was one of the most boring jobs I think anybody can do in the military. And even till today, driving to bases, I really have take my hat off for the guys standing at the gates as sentries or walking around in the bases. It is a ungrateful job, but it is a job which is necessary to be done. The most boring time was actually doing these duties on a weekend. So we used to start on a Monday, so you go through from Monday evening, you'd stand guard duty at the gates, and it would like continue up until Sunday, and then your duty would change. Saturdays and Sundays, we would stand in the guard towers or patrol the flight line area. Out of pure boredom, I think I can recall the number of paces between 5 hangar, 1 hangar, 2 hangar, 3 hangar, 4 hangar, the admin building, all the buildings in the security area. I used to pace off 1 step, 1 foot at a time, just to pass the time of boredom. But that was one of the things we had to do, was just standing guard and walking between the hangars and just making sure that there were no people that were not supposed to be there. On one occasion, we found a vehicle that was coming into the base after hours to fill up the vehicle with fuel. I think it was a DD556, or there was one other vehicle trip authorization form in all the vehicles at that stage. There was some Datsun shape or Toyota Corollas. I can't remember what the exact make was. But we had a vehicle, most of the squadrons had the same vehicles, the APC, the lobbies, everybody had the same vehicles that were bought from either Toyota or Datsun or whoever supplied the military with vehicles. But as it was, some people on the base had the same civilian vehicles. Okay. One of the gentlemen on the base had a white, let's say a Toyota Corolla for argument's sake. And the unit where he worked also had a white Toyota Corolla. So he had this idea of actually taking his civilian vehicle. Well, he used to drive out the base with the military vehicle in the evening when he was on standby, and switch his number plate, put the military number plates on the civilian vehicle and drive into the base, and then top up his civilian vehicle with fuel, drive out the base. Essentially, we would be none the wiser. It was a military vehicle coming into the base, and then you drive off. And at the stage, a few weeks into this scheme that he had, he'd actually forgotten to fix the military number plate, or it must have fallen off somewhere on his car. He came driving in, simply the front, wrote the registration number into the vehicle log. He drove in, and he went to fill up the fuel, and he came out, and as when he came out, the sentry looked at the vehicle as what it left, and he saw I think it was a CY or CR number plate at the back, and not the traditional R or M number plate which he used to have. So yeah, so people tried strange ways of topping up their fuel. I don't know what happened to him, but I assume he was charged, and there might have been a board of inquiry for this. Then one day, I had started to ask for a transfer to East Plot. I think I bugged the squadron commanders so many times, together with some of the other pilots that were stationed in Cape Town previously with 7 Squadron. I think everybody, at least once a day, he must have had somebody go and ask, listen, I'd like to go back to Cape Town, transfer me back to the squadron, or transfer me away. I don't want to be at Langebaan. So as an ops clerk, I used to tag on to these lieutenants, and when they went to go and complain, I used to be complaining with them and asking for a transfer to East Plot, to be closer to home. I think he really got fed up with us one day, and at this stage, he just called a few of us in, and he said, X5 Squadron guys, what I'm going to tell you, keep it to yourself. 5 Squadron is going to be reconstituted in a few years' time with a new fighter aircraft. Okay. And we just looked at him and thought, well, there's an arms embargo. Where are we going to get new aircraft from? Okay. And I think we all brushed it off our shoulders. And he said, if we stick with 7 Squadron, sometime in the future, in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we will be reconstituting the squadron, and it will be new aircraft and all this. But he couldn't tell us at this stage what aircraft it was. We only found out years later that it was the Cheetah E's that were modified, and that 5 Squadron was reconstituted at Lutjegard, I think in 1991, somewhere over there. Don't quote me on that, but I think somewhere in the early 90s. So from there, we continued asking for transfers. I eventually, the one Monday morning, coming back from Cape Town from a weekend, he had, I think, had enough of us, And as when he passed by the option, I was, Commandant, when can I get a transfer? He just said, come to my office now. I went with him to his office, and he said, once I entered his office, I said, I want your statement on my desk by 9 o'clock this morning, and then we will see about your transfer. So I went back to the office, went to write my request for a transfer to Easterplot, and it was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks later, I got transferred to the base command post at Easterplot as Ops Clerk. So I cleared out of Langebaan weg, I think it was the end of August sometime. Yeah, I started at Easterplot on the 1st of September. So it must have been the last week of August, I cleared out of Langebaan weg. So that was my time at 7th Squadron. It was a fun time. I learned a lot, especially about the application of the fighters, fighter operations in the Air Force. Had very good interaction with the Navy. We had a lot of gun-exes with the Navy, so I was speaking to the Navy quite a lot. So although we were in the ops room at the squadron, we did interface with many other units. Other units which I can recall, which we were interfacing with, was with the anti-aircraft guys at Youngsfield, coordinating gun-exes with them, the Navy, plenty. So yeah, so being in the Air Force, in the operations or intelligence environment, it was really a joint environment. You would interface with the Army and the Navy almost on a daily basis at the squadron. People at the squadron that I would like to thank is Bart Helflich. Unfortunately, he passed away a year or so ago. Our paths crossed again when he was the base commander at Petersburg when I got there. I could never understand him. I don't think we had a bit of a love-hate relationship. He used to call me Engelsman the whole time. And I think because of bugging him for a transfer, he didn't have much time for me. But anyway, other guys at the squadron, as I said, Bobby Crinnell, he was one of the flight commanders, ops officers. Also a very good guy. He eventually flew Cheetahs, and I think he's flying in Australia. He's flying training aircraft there for the Royal Australian Air Force. Other guys, Ed Every, also a Mirage pilot, which passed away some years later. Andre Stapa was there. Willie Murray, Charles Pitzier, he was at school with me. He became a Gripen test pilot, or I think he's still a test pilot at TFTC, flying Gripen. Who else was there that I can recall? Andre Stapa. Oh, then we had a lot of Stoutgat loots that were just very mischievous at the squadron. I can't remember half of their names. But on the senior side, that was it. There's another guy, Captain Rick Frayne, also a very good guy that I worked with. I just want to go down the passage. Bobby Crinnell, yeah. Those are basically the main people that I worked with at the squadron. And then there were the maintenance guys as well. So that was my time at 7th Squadron. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't know what my career was going to do in the future, but I would end up back in the fighter line in, I think, 1991, 92, when I was transferred to Petersburg. So I booked into Easterplot as an ops clerk at the base command post in September 1985. I eventually got my transfer to Cape Town, which I wanted, after the letdown earlier of going to 5 Squadron, being to Durban, and then to Langebaan. So I joined Easterplot base command post, working as an ops clerk. And on the first day, also cleared in, had all the paperwork done, and it wasn't by the afternoon where Major Oosthuizen was the base operations officer, had also told me, Vernon, don't worry, we'll brief you tomorrow on what you're supposed to do in the option. Okay. Coming from a squadron, I had a basic idea of what we used to do at the squadrons, but at the base command post, it was a bit of a different kettle of fish. It is now 40 years later, and I'm still waiting for that briefing. So, Major Oosthuizen, if you're hearing this or watching this, please give me my brief on how to run or work in a base command post in the South African Air Force. Anyway, I had gone through the first day, met everybody at Easterplot. Now, Easterplot had a bit of a unique situation. We had the base command post, that was responsible for coordinating all the flight operations at the base, all the taskings and all that, with the satellite unit at DF Milan Airport. So at Eysterplaat itself, squadrons which fell under the base command post or under the operational control of the base commander was 22 Squadron, which was flying Alouette 3 and Westland Wasp helicopters, 30 Squadron, which was flying Super Freelong and Puma helicopters, 25 Squadron, which was flying Dakotas, 25 Squadron flying Dakotas, then 27 Squadron flying the Albatrosses, and 35 Squadron had just finished phasing out the Shackletons at the squadron, at 35 Squadron, I think was in 1994, on their last flight. Then we had 109 and 110 Squadron, which was the commando squadrons or voluntary air squadrons, which were attached to us as well. So we were looking after all those squadrons. Base ops duties, basically the same as at the squadron. However, all the squadrons used to contact us when they needed mission numbers, when there were taskings. So we coordinated all the maritime taskings with Southern Air Command and the Silvermine Air Command Post. So when we had a little book with all the mission numbers for all the squadrons that were written in it, and when a squadron wanted to go fly, they'd just call us and say, this is the aircraft number, this is what the mission type that they want to do, this is the pilot's name, takeoff time, and expected landing time. We take that information, enter it into this old B18 book, and then allocate a mission number and the squadron go fly. And then at the end of the day, we would also be responsible to make sure that all the mission reports had been done. The mayflies from the squadrons were sent to the base command post in the afternoon, I think around about 3 o'clock. And from there, we used to consolidate a base-wide mayfly covering all the squadrons to Silvermine, and then they would disseminate it back up to Air Force headquarters, wherever it was going at that time. One of our other duties was, as ops clerk, was to decode and to make sure that all the NOTAMs were available and applicable to the area in which we were flying. Now, a NOTAM is a notice to airmen. It is a complicated, well, it was a complicated message at that stage. I think it's become a lot less complicated over the years. If I could look at how our NOTAMs look at, which we get at the unit now, how they look. But years back, they had a Q code. Okay, now everything in the NOTAM used to have the time of validity, the airfield, and it basically covered any activity regarding air traffic and navigation services. One of these we had to keep updated on a regular basis, as what NOTAMs come out now. As ops clerks used to do, we used to not like to do this task. It was not a very pleasant task to keep all the NOTAMs up to date. So once a week or once a month, you'd sit with a stack of NOTAMs this high. And it wasn't that you could start from the top. You literally had to start from the bottom and work through all the papers to make sure that NOTAMs that have cancelled, previous NOTAMs are all cancelled, and that the new ones are actually in place. Okay? Many times you cancel or relook at the same NOTAM over and over and over while you're busy with this. The same thing, we're also responsible to keep a copy of the pilot's notes, which is like a Air Force version of the Jefferson manual, which we're familiar with now, just having all the landing plates and approach procedures and departure procedures of all the airfields, all military and civilian in South Africa. Also updated once every few months, although the updates came out once a month. The ops clerks, and we basically neglected this because you hardly ever use the publications. But this also used to sometimes take a day or two to sort out all the previous amendments, because you had to start at the last amendment which was received and work to the newest one. Not a very pleasant chore, but I even saw a lot of the pilots in the Air Force, some of the squadron drivers used to have stacks of amendments that they actually never put in their pilot's book. So I think it was a standard practice all over the Air Force. I also was responsible at this unit for the DF Milan flights. We used to have a mid-green and a mid-purple system. Mid-green used to be a NATO type of signal, which had the month's maritime flights on for all the maritime operations because we had worked with the Navy on the SS Tafelberg and the frigates, where the helicopters used to join on that quite often. So we were basically responsible for coordinating all the stuff with the Navy as well, with the squadrons. I'll never forget one day, one of the ops clerks, or one of the ways that we had, if you walked into the main ops room, we had a ops board which used to contain all the information on the Air Force had a 15-point plan in which all taskings used to come through on the signal, and it was basically replicated on this massive wall in the ops room. Now the top half used to be all the pre-planned or pre-task missions under control of Silvermine. The second half of the board used to be all the daily flights out of Air Force Base Base Department. The lower half used to be Cape Town International, the albatrosses and stuff that were flying out of Cape Town. The ops officer wanted to be able to, at a glance, to see what type of aircraft was flying. So each aircraft type was written in a different color. Okay, so for example, the Imps were written in red. The Pumas and Freelons were green. The Alouettes and the Wasps were in blue. The Dakotas were in black. There's a couple of colors that he wanted to just, at a glance, if he's looking for Alouette or for Puma or a voluntary squadron aircraft, he could like just look up on the board, and instead of reading through everything, he could like see line by line which was there. Now, whiteboard markers, as you know, it takes about a few days, and then they don't want to write as advertised anymore. So one of the national servicemen had actually had this bright idea on a Sunday evening. One of your duties used to be to transfer all the flights from the pre-planned tasking, which used to be on a board on the left-hand side, onto the daily flight schedule, which was in front of the ops officer's window. So he used to take off all the previous flights because he didn't want to see any gaps when he walked in the morning. Okay, so you delete the flight and move the flight up, or if there was another flight on, you transfer it onto the board. This national serviceman decided the whiteboard markers are not writing sharp enough. So he had a plan to redo the pre-planned board, which had flights for maybe 1 month written on, mainly in green because it was maritime type of flights, I think. And then he was going to rewrite the daily ops board. So Sunday evening, apparently he had this idea. He made notes of all the flights, and then he decided, well, I'm going to rewrite everything in nice, bright colors. Okay. In one of the drawers, he must have found some permanent markers, which he didn't know were permanent markers. He just opened his Koki pens, and he saw all the points were nice and sharp. Okay. So he transferred all these flights, I think through the night. It must have been 20 or 30 flights that he transferred and moved up and shifted and all that. So Monday morning we come walking in, and we look at the ops board, and suddenly the sight picture looks a bit different. Everything looks a lot sharper, and we thought, oh, okay, maybe we got some new permanent markers, and the guy wrote it over. Okay. So he left, and as soon as the aircraft got airborne, we used to go to the estimated time of departure, and we used to like drop off on the estimate time of departure the planned time, and we'd put in the actual time. Okay. And one of the ops guys stood up on the board, and we tried to remove the time. Okay. Oops. And we found out this ops clerk had rewritten this brand new ops board, which we'd had. It must have also been in there for a few weeks. They'd been revamping the ops room. He had written all the flights with permanent markers. Okay. So needless to say, there was some explaining to you the next day, and permanent markers were duly banned out of the ops room. Some other funny incidents which we had at night, we used to do night shifts, so we used to do a 24-hour night duty at some stage, usually maybe once a week or once every second week, which used to just do a night shift. We became the switchboard at 4:15 in the afternoon, used to accept duty, and basically used to be the ops clerk and then the duty ops officer, which used to be one of the pilots or officers on the base, usually a lieutenant or a captain that used to come and do duty officer duties. They hardly were interested in any of the activities of the ops room. To them, it was just how quick can we go and sleep, and we're going to go to the mess, and we will go and do our rounds. Okay, so as the ops clerk, you basically just ran your duties the rest of the day, and he was basically just there if there's any issue. basically just to support and be the representative of the base commander. So it came on a couple of occasions that we had medevacs and casvacs. Usually most of the casualty search and rescues used to take place after 4 in the afternoon, when people used to go out on their bogey boards or on their ships. It used to be a bit of a hassle in the afternoon. So most of the search and rescue flights that I recall after hours, usually between 4 and 4:45, 5 o'clock, when everybody was either on the duty bus or their way home. It caused a bit of chaos, but anyway. We used to be basically then responsible for running the option and doing all the planning for the next day. One of the frustrating things was the ops room doubled as the switchboard. Okay, so at 4:15, the base's switchboard used to transfer to the ops room. So you used to get all the calls from outside. Okay, now Air Force Base Easterport at that stage, the base number was 515141. Okay, to the switchboard. So that number used to be transferred to the option. So one of the telephones over there used to get all the base calls. Okay, people wanting to speak to their national service brothers. I'll never forget many calls. Girlfriends or mothers or fathers phoning, they want to speak to John. John is in the Air Force. Okay, well, who is John in the Air Force? Where is he? No, he's in the Air Force. He's doing his national service. Okay, so we had many calls like that that just frustrated us. One of the most frustrating things was the emergency services in Cape Town. Their telephone number was 515151. Okay, now it was still these old dial telephones. It was before the days of push buttons. Okay, so 51515151 was the emergency number. And I believe many people in panic states trying to phone the ambulance services or fire services had maybe slipped the number. The closest number to the 5 at the end used to be the 4, which ended up receiving a lot of calls where you had to try and calm down people just trying to get an ambulance or get the police out to an accident scene or something like that. And you learn to be very diplomatic and actually to try and calm people down as why not. That's the wrong number. And believe me, convincing somebody that is in a panic, that wants his only focus is getting the fire brigade or an ambulance service or police service, but they're not interested in you trying to tell them, but it's the wrong number. Okay, so we learned to deal with that. And I had many calls like that during my time as an ops clerk at Easterport. Throughout the night, if there were call-outs, we used to manage the call-outs, and a friend of mine that used to be on duty at Silvermine. I think throughout our Air Force career, when I was on duty at Easterport and when Glenn was on duty at Silvermine, we never had a peaceful sleep. Okay, there always used to be a call out at the weirdest hours of the morning. Motor vehicle accidents out in Oudtshoorn or in the middle of the Karoo, needing decks to be tasked. Countless of that. So when I used to check at 4 o'clock, 4:15 in the afternoon, who the ops clerk is at Silvermine, and Glenn used to answer, I know it's not going to be a night for us to sleep. One of the bad things is you had to deal with the media as well. Okay, although I was not directly involved with this, it was pressed on us that there's a public relations officer at the base, okay, and that we are literally not allowed to pass on any information on ongoing exercises or search and rescue activities which the media might have found out about. Unfortunately, one night, one of the national servicemen, there was a search and rescue for people that got lost in the mountains in the Franschhoek area. It ended in a bit of tragedy. The ops clerk was on duty at about 8 o'clock on the SABC News. There was a news update. And shortly after that, the news reporters had actually phoned Easterport to speak to the public relations officer. He wasn't available, and he asked the ops clerk what the status is of the mountain rescue operation. Okay. The standard answer would be, I'd pass this call on to the PR officer, and they would deal with him, and I'd take a number and have them call. This poor ops clerk had just had some bad news that they were actually in a recovery process of 1 or 2 bodies. And he just blurted out that they're busy recovering the bodies. Okay, that also didn't bode too well for us ops clerks the next morning when we got in. It was a pure and honest mistake, but I think one which many ops clerks made during their Air Force career. You get so involved in a rescue operation, although you're not there. The emotional side, you have aircraft which are busy flying, you have crew. You are obviously inquisitive on what is actually busy happening. And as I say, that evening, it was just bad news that he'd been told that they're busy recovering the bodies. And he blurted out this to the news. And at the end of the news at 8:30, the news reporter given an update. And they said they'd been recovering bodies, and the next of kin had not yet been informed of the situation. So it was a bit of a bad one. That's something incident I remember till today, because we had quite a lesson the next morning on what to say and what not to say to the PR people. Other things that happened at Easterplaat, which I can tell you about, is we had a ops clerk. I'll just call him Corporal S. Used to be a bit of a mischievous guy. Now, this one, I'll have to tell the joke in Afrikaans, okay? For those who don't understand Afrikaans, you can go and have a look at who the characters were, maybe Wikipedia it or Google it. Blackie had this thing of being Mr. Prankster, okay? So the one morning, we had to phone the base or joint air transport support cell at Air Force headquarters to make sure that all the flights for the VIPs, because Easterplaat handled all the VIP flights from 21 Squadron down to Cape Town with the Parliament being there, and all the VIP trips were handled into Easterplaat. One of your duties used to be is to phone JATC and basically ask them, is there any updates to some of the flights? Now, many of the Air Force members would remember there was a gentleman, Commandant Paul Kruger, at Air Force headquarters. Now, on numerous occasions, I never heard him actually mention his rank when he answered the phone. So Corporal S, the one morning phoned, and it was this normal call, and I'm going to do this in Afrikaans. Please forgive me for doing this, but there's no other way that you can catch the humor in this. A very short phone call. The phone rang. And the other side of the phone, the answer came, "Goeiemorgen, this is Paul Kruger." Good morning, this is Paul Kruger. Okay. On the other side, the corporal at Easterplaat replied, "Good morning, goeiemorgen, this is Jan van Riebeck hier." And he duly put down the telephone. Okay. So the founder of South Africa and one of the presidents, well, the founder of South Africa in 1652 had just spoken to one of the presidents of the old Transvaal Republic, if I'm not mistaken, who was a president here in the late 1800s, 1890s. So that was a bit of a funny moment which we had, having Paul Kruger and Jan van Riebeck actually speak to one another, albeit a very short telephone conversation. Also with the night duties, I'm going off track a bit, but this is as well things are coming to my mind. Initially, we didn't have a television in the option, so it was quite boring from 4:15 if there wasn't any activities going on till 7 o'clock the next morning. So we had we used to call them the donkey set tannies. I think it was one of the institute or something that donated stuff to the military. They had decided to donate a television to the option. So we'd had this television for a month or two, and one morning we came in, and one of the ops clerks, Corporal E, if I can call it that, he had decided to clean some of the shotguns that had been stored in the safe one evening. And we don't know whether the shotgun had a bullet in, or he loaded a bullet into it, or whatever. He claims it discharged without him actually firing it. And needless to say, our television got shot out with buckshot, and it was lying in spares the next morning when we got there. Okay. Years later, I think 1995, 96, I visited the option. It was almost 10 years after this happened. And there were still marks of the buckshot on the inside of the press board where it went in. Okay. Few people knew what actually happened, but it was Corporal E that had actually destroyed our television for us. So we didn't have a television for another couple of months. One of the interesting trips at Easterplaat is also a lot of the times the squadrons used to allow us to go on flights with them. And I remember asking the ops clerk that was a 30 squadron if there's ever a free-run flight and they're going to take packs up, please take passengers with. Okay, I put my name on the list to fly in a free-run. So as it was one afternoon, I had a call that there is a flight possibly going to Southwest Africa. They'll put my name on. I'm the next guy to go on a flip with the squadron when they had flights going. A few days later, I clean forgot about this, and a few days later, there was a task flight. Earlier the one morning, we had a phone call. They had to send a Super Freelon with some spares to Lüderitz Bay. It was the same day flight, the RSD. So Ops Clark phoned me and said, Vernon, there's a flight to Lüderitz, flying out now. If you can be at the squadron in the next half an hour, you can jump on the aircraft, and if all goes well, you come back this evening. Well, it became 2 days. I ran at the opportunity. It was the days before cell phones and phones. I just grabbed my car keys, whatever that. I don't know what I had done with my car keys, but anyway, I ran off to the squadron, got there, got to the ops room, and basically signed the indemnity form and ran out to the aircraft. The crew were at the aircraft already and hopped on board the aircraft and hoped to come back the same day. We eventually landed at Lüderitz late afternoon, and we couldn't fly back because the work which had to be done is there were some batteries that had to be flown out for the hydrographic survey ship. There was a snag with the Alouette, which was on the SAS Protea, or I think it was the SAS Protea. It was docked offshore a while. There were some spares that had to be flown out to the Alouette as well. She'd also gone unserviceable. So we flew in, landed there the evening. I had no money. I don't think the crew had any money with them. We just landed on the harbor area. And one of the accommodation, we didn't know where we were going to stay. We realized we had the night stop. The Alouette crew, I think it was Harvey Fenter, if I recall, had come on shore with the engineer. We stayed at the Boergenvels Hotel for the evening, which was actually quite nice. I've never had so much crayfish in my life. They really entertained us, and it was an unscheduled night stop. And then the next day, we basically flew back to Eisteplat. So that was my first unplanned night stop in the Air Force. No money, no clothes, just the clothes we had on, up and down, and it became the norm throughout time. Also, at Eisteplat, we were very much involved with the riot operations. So we used to do mobile air operation team deployments down to Manenberg police station. This used to be a small team, the ops clerk and the ops officer usually coordinating the Alouettes that were flying in anti-riot operations in the Cape as well. So we saw a lot of the riots which were going on. It was not a very nice sight at some stages. We all know about the necklacing that used to go on a couple of occasions. We witnessed some bad things happen during the riots, and you couldn't believe that the people involved in the riots were actually doing this to their own people, setting things alight. It was carnage at some places in Manenberg and Yanga and Kualetu and these places. But anyway, that's a tale for another day. So we used to fly out in the morning to Manenberg police station, land there, and then the Alouette used to basically fly support with the police during the day, and then in the afternoons we used to fly back to Eisteplat. So that on the Bayot side, we've done a lot of that. Come December, I got allocated to 22 Squadron on temporary duty for two months, as the ops clerk had gone on vacation, and then he was off to do a special duty tour. At that time, I got to meet and get introduced to air visual reconnaissance and photo recce work. We had a Bosbok MK MC33 that had been assigned to Eisteplat to come and do some photo reconnaissance over the riot areas in the Cape Flats. And I had an opportunity to fly a lot of vis recce and photo recce flights, getting a lot of exposure there on flying and flight operations over areas where they were throwing stuff at us. Okay, So yeah, they used to throw, I'll never forget, they used to try and throw bricks at the alouettes and stuff when we came into land at Manenberg. It used to be a bit of a challenge coming in, trying to throw stones at the helicopters which are coming in. But I say, I met I think it was a guy with the name Alex Batley. Was a Bosbok pilot. He took me on a number of flights, taught me some of the basics of flight planning, routes and altitudes, how they actually conduct a visual reconnaissance, what to look out for, what to report, what to write in the mission reports and that type of stuff. So I flew a couple of recce flights with him, and then also assisted him with my limited knowledge at that stage. He taught me quite a lot on how they'd done the photo recce planning. So then I spent 22 squadron in the mornings, obstacle duties at the squadron, and in the afternoons, I used to spend time flying in the Bosbok over the Cape Flats. January arrived, and I was put on standby to go on my first operational deployment. Okay. Now, we were usually on standby for a week, and if there were any ad hoc deployments that used to come up, we used to get called out, and it used to be deployments until further notice. So I had a week's vacation, went down to Port Elizabeth to visit some family, and came back. And the Monday, my standby started, and I just got into Oysterplaat the afternoon, and I got told, you are on standby as of this afternoon to go on a special operations tour, okay, or space duty is what we used to call it. So I was in standby for a week, and I thought, okay, very seldom the guys get called out, nothing much is going to happen. The next morning, I got to work, and I got told, you better go home, go and pack your kit. You're going for an exercise for 3 days. Okay, where to? No, you're going to Pretoria. Okay, so report here this afternoon. There's a log arm SAAF L100, which is flying to Pretoria. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're going on this exercise, and you're going for quick training, and you should be back at Oysterplaat Monday in a week's time from now. Yeah. The signal said transfer to Tactical Support Command until further notice. So I went home, went to pack my gear, got back to Oysterplaat the afternoon, hopped onto a log air flight from SAAF, flew to Waterkloof, stayed in a little bungalow at Waterkloof the Tuesday evening. Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday morning, we got picked up by a duty driver who were taken to Tactical Support Command at Snake Valley. There we were in a classroom, and we were basically instructed on how to operate and create a tactical airfield unit. Now, TAU is an airfield which the Air Force could deploy remotely. Okay, if there's a strip of highway somewhere in the country, you could deploy there and go and operate aircraft out of it. So it's a tactical airfield, not permanent infrastructure. So by Friday morning, we thought, well, we're all finished right now. We don't know what this training is actually about. So I'm going to fly down on Monday on the schedule back to Oysterplaat. Okay. Friday afternoon, we finish the course, and we get put into E20 minibuses. And we get told, well, we're going up north. Okay, so where's up north? Up north was, we are leaving to Petersburg. Okay, we're going to night stop in Petersburg. Well, this is not Cape Town. Okay. Yes, well, you're going to Petersburg, and when we're there, we'll find out where we're going. So I went up by car Friday evening to Petersburg. We night stopped in some hall in Petersburg on the base. It might even be in one of the hangars or something. I can't recall. But anyway, we night stopped there, and the next morning, the convoy joined us, and we drove up to Msina airfield, okay, where we established 98 TAU. So that my first operational deployment was as an ops clerk at 98 TAU up at Msina, and that was, I think, from about the first week in January up until mid-April sometime. I spent time there. Now, our main operational focus at Msina was basically also counterinsurgency. There were a number of landmines we planted in the northern part of the country, on which we basically, the Air Force decided to deploy some helicopters to support the army. So we established this airfield. I think it was within 2 or 3 days. We were up and running. We had Alouettes assigned to us, Pumas assigned to us. There were 2 Borsboks that arrived, and we were operational airfield, operating out of Msina airfield for a few months. Mainly doing trooping operations, flying troops around. We were assisting with putting up the Marnet antenna systems in the northern border along the South African-Zimbabwe border and down Mozambique, and I think also down towards the Botswana side as well. Okay, so had a lot of fun there. Had a lot of flying experience. A gentleman arrived with his Borsbok the one day with the name of Schalk Beton. His mother was a teacher in our primary school, and he was 2 years my senior in school. And we went to the same high school together. So he arrived, and the Borsbok was flying a lot of Visrecki and Furoreki flights, and I think I must have flown a good close on 100 hours in a couple of months over there just on Visrecki flights and Furoreki flights with him. So I gained a lot of experience over there. I really enjoyed the flying, both day and night. At this stage, if I recall, we also had very old first generation night vision goggles or night sights, which we used at night to do some Visrecki work with along the border. Before the day of all the modern day 3rd and 4th generation thermal images and that other stuff. So a very basic kit which we flew with, but very effective for that time. So I flew a lot on the Borsbok, the Alouettes, done a lot of trooping flights for reaction forces, looking at cross-border activities, former non-strategic forces, UPLA, well, not UPLA, I think mainly UPLA MK smuggling into South Africa, coming across the border. That was our main focus, and then there were a number of landmines that were planted in the area as well. So we spent a couple of months there at 98 TAU, very interesting times. I had a signal that was with me, as I said earlier, for 3 months, and I went back after 3 months to Eysterplaat. Okay. Well, after the tour at 98 TAU, I flew back to Eysterplaat, and that was about end of April. After a tour which was supposed to be 3 days, I spent 3.5 months away from home. I got back to Eysterplaat, resumed normal duties as ops clerk at Base Command Post Eysterplaat, and then was assigned to 30 Squadron also for a couple of weeks, working with the Puma and freelance squadrons over there. I think in May of that year, we had an opportunity. There was a split happening between the operations branch and the intelligence branch in the Air Force. And we had the opportunity to actually stay in operations or to remuster into the intelligence environment. Well, I'd seen enough of the operations environment up until that stage, being ops clerk. I said, you are really a skivvy at a lot of units, get used for a lot of stuff which is not actually your primary job, but that is life, I suppose. Okay. Again, a lot of experience. I had a fun time the first 2 years, first year and a half in the Air Force. Being as an ops clerk, I learned a lot about how the Air Force works, how flight operations work, just in general, working with a lot of people. Okay. I started to see this fascination with the intelligence environment, and it was something which had piqued my mind. Okay. And then I decided, well, when the signal came out, I'll never forget, the base intelligence officer was a guy who was a Captain Mike James. He had ad hocly used me for some intelligence work on the base, just preparing intelligence briefings. And I got to see the daily intelligence reports and intelligence summaries, looking at the shipwrecks and the intelligence information which was coming in. The situation reports from the conflict up north we used to receive every day. And it started to prickle me. And then I just got a liking, most likely, into the intelligence environment to be involved with that. And then when the opportunity presented itself, he said he has got a intelligence slot open if I'm interested in actually going and becoming intelligence assistant. So shortly I wrote my thing or my statement to remuster to intelligence, and it was a few days later and I'd remustered to intelligence. Okay. So Eysterplaat, the role of the intelligence section at Eysterplaat is basically to coordinate all intelligence activities at the base on behalf of the base commander, working with the base operations coordinator, which was the deputy commander of the base, and also supplying intelligence daily to the squadrons which is relevant to them. Okay. And then also liaising with the Navy, because our primary role had been in the maritime environment. I'll speak about that a bit more later. But I got involved with the intelligence stuff at a very low level. My daily task as an intelligence clerk at the base was basically to prepare the daily intelligence brief for the operations coordinator. I've done this by on a daily basis, we used to get intelligence summaries, used to be long classified signals, which used to come from Air Force headquarters, basically giving a summary of what was busy happening in the border war, and in Eastern Theatre, which was on the Mozambique side, the Northern Theatre, which was Zimbabwe and Botswana, Homeland, which used to be internal South Africa and the internal unrest situation, and then naturally what was happening in the Angola Theatre of Operations. Okay, so it used to be a long summary of the pertinent intelligence activities which used to be taking place. So this I had to, and with the situation report which came down, basically some of the casualties which we'd encountered, some basic information in the SITREP. I had to consolidate this into like a 5 or 10 minute briefing every morning for the OPSCO. So in the mornings, arrived at the base, had a few minutes literally to go through this lengthy document, pick out the most important pertinent information which the OPSCO would need, prepare a quick verbal brief, and hop around to his office and give him a quick briefing on what had happened the previous day in the border war and in the other area. Okay. And then also focusing very much on what had happened in the Western Cape with the riot situation. That was basically the scope of the intelligence briefs. On occasion when we had foreign naval activity along the coast, we included that in our briefs as well to discuss the naval activity coming around the coast. So the task force, we had a lot of Soviet task force which used to come around the coast, and more about that when I speak about 27 Squadron, my time there. But we were basically monitoring the shipping activity which is coming along our South African coastline. Shortly after that time at Eysterplaat, I was asked to go back to 30 Squadron. I went to work at 30 Squadron for maybe another 2-3 weeks as an clerk. The squadron used to have their operations with the Special Forces guys from, I think it was Fort Ricky, which was at Saldanha. So we provided a lot of intelligence for the aircrew before their deployments with the SS Tafelberg and joining with the Pumas onto the SS Tafelberg. So a lot of information was provided on that day. So I spent a few weeks at 30 Squadron doing this, and then came back to Eysterplaat, where we started to decide, or a decision was basically made to formalize the maritime intelligence stuff, to get a bit of a better picture. Because of resources, we didn't have much people actually to focus on specific areas. So you had to focus on what is happening up in Namibia, what is happening on the East Coast, what's happening on the West Coast, what's happening on the South Coast. Look at to build a picture of what is happening. So this was included in the briefs. Yes, that was basically what we done at Eysterplaat in the intelligence cell. Okay. The maritime stuff I enjoyed a lot. It was a dynamic environment, building the maritime intelligence picture. We had these big Mercator plotting charts. Every day the Navy used to send I can't remember if it was a mid-white or a mid-black signal or something like that, with all the known shipping traffic which was outside the harbors, arriving in the harbors, coded vessels, which we weren't supposed to report on. We used to get this, and then also all the traffic which was going along the coast. And we used to try and plot this on a daily basis on these Mercator plotting charts to provide some information to 27 Squadron and 35 Squadron when they went on their maritime operations. So this was basically at Eysterplaat. At the same time at Eysterplaat, we had a situation where we had a lot of national service coming in. Also working, we had a national service intelligence officer that was doing his national service for a 2-year period, a guy with the name of Jones. We also used to still double up in the ops room. Although we were intelligence functionaries, we used to double up and do normal ops duties at night. Okay. So also one morning we arrived, we had rotations where each base basically had a rotation for commitments on the border bases, being Ondangwa, Oshikati, Rundu, Mapacha, Katima, Reikop, and then in Western Air Command. Okay, each base had a certain number of ops posts and inposts that they had to fulfill on a 3 to 3 month rotation basis. So one morning, Easterplaat had a lot of ops clerks in the ops clerk, well, in the ops room. Okay. The base commander came walking into the ops room. I think it was Colonel Des Lynch, if I'm not mistaken. And there must have been maybe 20 or 30 ops clerks standing around in the center of the ops room. And he just looked at the ops officer and he said, "What are all these ops clerks doing here?" Okay. And the ops officer said, "Oh, they are my ops clerks." Okay. And the next words were, "Get rid of half of them." Okay. So the ops officer duly went to speak to the ops code. And the ops code basically, he told the ops code, the base commander says, "Get rid of the ops clerks." We didn't have any places to send them because they were basically waiting to go up to the operational area to fulfill positions at the operational bases. So a few days later, half of these ops clerks get transferred after a signal had been sent. We have, say, 12 or 15 ops clerks extra at the base. And Air Force Headquarters was too glad to receive a thing to say, "Well, we've got all these extra ops clerks, you can send them where they want to." Okay, so they got transferred to all places around the country. A month or so later, Easterplaat's new rotation started. Okay, now these ops clerks had to fulfill ops duties at the bases where we were deployed up north. So needless to say, we had a shortfall of about 50% of ops clerks. Okay, it took about a year, I think, to recover. So a lot of the permanent guys at the base, permanent force ops clerks and in staff, had to double up on operational tours just for this, on the spur of the moment decision, get rid of half of the ops clerks. Okay. So we had a bit of a tough time. Many of our mates at the base command post and at the other squadrons, we were doubling up. I know at the stage I was working as the base in clerk, supporting 22 Squadron again as an ops clerk, sometimes during the day, going to DF Milan, working there. So we really covered for each other for a year. So it was back to ops and int, working basically both jobs every day. But that was basically 1986. At the end of 1986, things really started to heat up in Angola and the operational area. I'd done a couple of courses. Also during the 1986 period, and beginning of 1987, I was also once again scheduled to do a special duty tour January, February, March at Western Air Command. I can't remember what happened, but that tour got cancelled and I remained at Easterplaat for 2 or 3 months up until March. In March, I got transferred for 3 months to Air Force Base Rundu. Okay. As an intelligence assistant at 320 Forward Air Force Command Post. 1987 was, I think, the start of the last hot war of the Cold War. I got transferred for a 3-month stint as an intelligence assistant to 320 Air Force Command Post, which was based at Air Force Base Rundu. Now, just to give you a bit of an overview, the command structure in Namibia at that stage, all the bases resided under Western Air Command, which was one of 3 air commands. So we had Western Air Command that was responsible for Southwest Africa, Namibia, Angola, that theatre of operations. Southern Air Command, which was the Cape Province and I believe Natal with all the maritime squadrons. That was based at Silvermine in Cape Town at the Naval Command Post in the bunker there. And then there was Main Threat Area, okay, which was situated in the Air Force Headquarters in Pretoria. Okay, and they were responsible for looking at Botswana, internal RSA, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Tanzania, and that theatre of operation again. So Rundu Air Force Base and 320 Forward Air Force Command Post resided under Western Air Command. Okay. We also had another one at Oshakati, which was 310 Air Force Command Post. Now, Air Force Command Post had a bit of a higher authority in the command and control structure, and they had a bit of a bigger organization as well. It was basically a duplicate of the Air Force Command Post in Pretoria, okay, responsible for conducting operations, all operations in Angola. Rundu was a subordinate, so we were just a forward Air Force Command Post, had a ops facility, telecommunications, and an intelligence cell. We at Oshakati, it had a much bigger organization. They had the analysis function for intelligence, where the intelligence process was driven and all this, and I'll speak about that as well during this video. Then we also had I think it was 370 Air Force Command Post, which was at Katima, Malilo, or Mapacha. Okay. Now, 320 Forward Air Force Command Post, the 20 came out of Sector 20. So we were co-located at the Sector 20 headquarters at Rundu, where 310 Air Force Command Post was co-located at Sector 10 headquarters in Oshakati, and Sector 70 out in the Caprivi at Katima and Mapacha. My tour was supposed to be for 3 months. As with all things usually extended in the military. I flew up to Rundu on a Friday afternoon, arrived at the base around about sunset after quite a long day. It was in a SAAF Air L100. We flew from Eysterplaat to Grootfontein, from Grootfontein to Ondangwa to Rundu, and then it was going on to Katima and Mapacha in the afternoon. And this is where all my fun and games in the intelligence environment really started. I had arrived at the base. It was late afternoon. I was worried. I was stressed. I didn't know what I was getting into. We heard about a lot of things that was happening up in the bush. You caught the snippets on the news and that type of stuff. And I tried to bring myself up to speed with the last 2-3 weeks stuff what was busy happening, just looking at the situation reports and all the intelligence reports which we're getting. But anyway, it was a thing we had to do, and we had to do a 3-month operational tour every year of our career while we were still in the organization. That was a given fact. So I arrived at Rundu, as I said, Friday evening. I'll never forget the sand at the movements. It is the brightest white sand after being in a L100 or civilian version of the C-130 Hercules for hours and hours in this dim light. It was really eye-blinding. Okay, this ramp opened at the back, and it was like looking into the sun with a reflection from the white sand. It's something guys that have been to the border will always tell you. It was that ramp opening, and yes, just the white sand and the blindness in your eyes. Okay. So I got off the aircraft. I was there to leave a gentleman with the name of Andre Maton. He was a sergeant at the ops room in Eysterplaat, also ops clerk, but he doubled up as an intelligence functionary at 320 Air Force, Forward Air Force Command Post. I took my balsack, and he met me at movements, and he put my baggage on a little Hilux pickup, and he said, I'm going to show you where the work is and where your accommodation is, or where our residential area is. Okay. So Andre and I started walking. I left my baggage on the pickup. Didn't know how it's going to get where. I didn't know where I was, and he just took me to Sector 20 headquarters. It was a couple of maybe 300 meters away from the movement section. I walked up there. He took me into the building, and he said, "This building, this is where you're going to work. Okay, this is the entrance. Here's the keypad code how to get into the Forward Air Force Command Post section." He took out a bunch of keys, and he showed me, and he said, "This key opens the intelligence office." I'd never forget, he unlocked the door, we went in. As what you went in, there's like 2 filing cabinets in front of me, and a couple of HF radios, which we used to listen to communications intelligence stuff, just keep busy, I suppose. To the left, or to my right, was another pair of doors, which entered into quite a big room, with like 3 tables in there, covered with also the army blankets, some cupboards, plenty maps up on the wall. He opened the one cupboard and he said, here's all your stationery, here's the books, here's this. This is what's on the map, and he gave me maybe 3-4 minute overview of what had been happening during the last 3 months that he'd been on his tour. And he said, well, he's flying back to South Africa on Sunday afternoon. He was supposed to hand over for at least 1 week. So yeah, I'm back to this thing. I'll brief you and you'll know what's happening. So I said, 2 occasions, I'm still waiting for the briefs. So we spent maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, maximum, I think, an hour, going through lots of files and documents. And basically, this file you record all the flights in which we know about. This one you do the intelligence reports in. This one, all the PI reports. So PI is a photo interpretation report, goes in here. The intelligence summaries go here. The situation report goes here. You have to do these statistics, and I'll speak about these statistics on how we actually knew about the build-up to Operation Modular Hooper and Packer a bit later. This document you have to prepare for the int officer every day. Okay, so it was really a rundown. It was an information overload of note. You have to calculate this every day. You have to do this with all the flights. We got a lot of communications intelligence. That's basically how we knew what was happening in the area. You put it in this file, okay? This goes here once a week. This stuff has to go to Oshakati. A lot of the intelligence which we received was a few days old. It wasn't as in the modern times where you can quickly Google something. I just remember there was literally no office IT infrastructure available. It was in the days before the internet, before mobile phones, before any of the technology that we're using today. That was the one office. He really gave me the quick overview. Okay, I tried to remember what was, tried to make a mental note of, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. We went out that door, we locked the door, opened the door on the left-hand side where we came in, and there was a computer standing there. I'd never switched on a computer in my life. I'd never seen a computer in my life at that stage. Okay. So he explained to me there's this software on it. I think it was known as Garbell or something like that. It was written by a very well-known intelligence officer and long friend of mine in the Air Force. Also learned a lot from him, Arno Viljoen. He was Mr. Intelligence, I think, 310 AFCP. And Ian Janssen from Vernon, who became Director of Intelligence. I think it was an effort by both of them, where they tried to have some form of electronic way of collating, I think, information and intelligence. Okay. The app which I used was, I think it was written in DBase 3 Plus at that stage. To start the app, you had this box of, I think, 20 floppy disks, which were like this size, which you had to load, and then the program would run. Okay, and halfway through, it would stop and say, reload disk number 1. So it was quite a frustrating process. It wasn't that you could just start up the computer and everything would be there like we are today. You had to load the program, do work, save everything, all that. Oh, and then there was a little tape streamer cassette, which we used to make a backup on. They basically said, okay, all the comment reports, all the flights which come in after you've analyzed them and recorded them, you write all the flights, you go type it into DBase 3. I think it was DBase 3 if I can recall. And then from there, once a week, you create this tape streamer and you get onto your aircraft once a week and you fly to Oshakati. And you take this tape there, you get a new tape, a blank tape, and you bring this back to Rundu again. So a lot of the data that we collected on what was basically happening, by the time it got to Oshakati, was almost a week old if it wasn't actually written in the daily intelligence summary, which was, it was just too much information to write every day. So you literally just basically sent a summary of the key aspects and the key issues that you picked up. The rest was in this tape streamer that I used to fly, and I think it was a Wednesday morning. We used to fly in a Cessna 402 or whatever commander aircraft I used to fly to Oshogati, drop off this tape streamer, whatever intelligence there was, we used to get back and then fly back to Rundu in the morning as well. The software also had some planning software on, which I think in Walter Weiss's story, he spoke about a lot of missions that the C-130 and C-160s used to do supply drops into Angola. Okay, I think we refer to them as long drop missions. I might be wrong, but long drop rings a bell in my mind. Okay, on the software, we had the radar times. We had a lot of intelligence-related, basic intelligence data recorded. And we would go and type in the frequencies of the comms plan. And there was a lot of stuff that we used to type into this thing. And it used to print out if there was one of these long drop flights, the Inkai Enkutsia. I used to do all the typing into the database and press print. And it used to print out these pages and pages and pages of A4 papers with, I think, frequencies. There was radar horizons on the radar operating times, a lot of things was on it. And he then used to use this for the planning at CSI or at Space Force headquarters back in Victoria a day or two later when they used to plan these long drop missions. So I was told there's this stuff, okay. And also told nobody else comes into this part of the office, it's yourself and the int officer. The National Service intelligence guy that worked with us, they can stay on the other side of the office. They have lost nothing in this side of the office. So that was my introduction. I think we spent about 2 hours in the Forward Air Force Command Post that evening, still not having a clue of where I'm going or what I'm going to do. Off we went to the pub, and as what you know, or the Air Force guys will know, at the pub at Rundu was known as the Lintuku, I think, meaning fish eagle. By about 7 or 8 p.m. at night, there used to be a tradition in the Air Force called greenies and brownies. Now, greenies used to be green liqueur, peppermint liqueur, and brownies, I think, used to be a chocolate liqueur, if I'm not mistaken. So all the new people, the greenies, fresh ones, used to have a shot of peppermint liqueur to welcome you to the base. And then the departing people that were departing the next week used to have their brownies. They're the older guys that have done their time. They used to have their brownies. So that done, we had dinner the evening. And I think by about 10 or 11 p.m., Andre said, well, now we're going into town to the Rundu Ontspannings Club, the Rock. Okay. I didn't know where this was, what it was. The National Service Germany that we had this old combi, which we all got into, and we all went off to the Rock. Okay. Everybody enjoyed the evening there. We got back to the base sometime in the morning. I eventually found a room. I don't know how my baggage got there, but the next morning when I woke up, my bags, or my ball sock, the only thing which I had with me was my ball sock, which we used to put all our kit in, that was lying in the room. The poor guy that had stayed in the room with me had indulged a bit too much in the pub the evening and woke up the next morning, scars all over his body. I asked him what had happened. Now, they had emptied the swimming pool sometime that Friday afternoon or during the Friday to clean or do some maintenance on the swimming pool. They always say when you are intoxicated, even in a motor vehicle accident, you have the least injuries because your body is just like a piece of jello. Okay. So at some stage in the evening, he decided he's going to take a swim, and he ran down this little narrow path and he flip-flopped into the swimming pool, and he landed on this granite part of the pool. Okay, needless to say, he was like just scarred or roofies, but I don't know what you call it now in English. But anyway, he was full of blood all over. And that was his thing over there. So I thought, man, the guys are rough over here. But anyway, so Saturday, we went back to the Forward Air Force Command Post. Andre introduced me to some of the guys working in the FACP, and we had another run over. Okay, and this time he spent a bit more time explaining to me what I have to do for the intelligence guys. And I still thought, well, he is flying home on Sunday, so there's still time to fly. I think at about 4 p.m. the afternoon, Andre said he has to go back to his room. We walked back to his room and he took his suitcase and he said, drop me off at Movements. I've got a flight, I'm leaving tonight. Okay, so I literally had my handover at Rundu was maximum of maybe 3 or 4 hours, which I didn't recall much. So Monday morning got into Rundu, or the Air Force Command Post, and I started working as an intelligence assistant, doing the first time real intelligence work. Okay. As the plot, yes, we touched on intelligence, but there was a lot of intelligence which had been provided to us. We were basically just a post office, keeping the squadrons up to date with what the intelligence situation was and if there was any issue. We weren't that much involved in the whole intelligence cycle and the whole intelligence process as what I was going to become involved with at 320 Air Force Command Post. The Air Force, just to give you an idea of the sources which we used a lot of sources, but mainly everything got consolidated at 310 Forward Air Force Command Post, and we got a lot of intelligence from them. And we were basically also at the FACP, we had the ability to do the intelligence cycle, certain parts of it, but most of the work was done at Oshikati. The main sources which we had access to at Rundu or at 320 Forward Air Force Command Post, and I'll speak about the two interchangeably, 320 FACP versus Rundu. I was speaking about 320 FACP. Our main source of intelligence was we had a liaison team with the UNITA forces at the base via the Military Intelligence Division Special Tasks, IME Spec Starker. We had a very good liaison with them. They used to liaise with the UNITA forces in Angola on a daily basis, so we used them as HUMINT on that side. I will speak about dispenser. Dispenser was the code word which we used for UNITA at that stage. I only found that out months into my operational tours. I always just heard everybody speaking about dispenser forces. I eventually found out that there's the UNITA guys. Then we had co-located with us at Sector 20, we had the GS2 organization, which was under command of a Major Pew Pew van Niekerk. His wife was also an Air Force intelligence officer. She was the base intelligence officer at Rundu. And subordinate organization to 320 FACP. And so we done a lot of liaison with them. Then we had the communications intelligence environment. I think it was 512 or 511, 512 and 513 troop, which was on the signals regiment. They basically provided us with all the communications intelligence reports, which we used to call comics, because really it used to be a comic reading the stuff. And then, as I say, from Air Force headquarters, we got some other intelligence, and they had their sources from external sources from other foreign intelligence liaison organizations that they had access to. So, but basically, those are the main sources which we had. Then, on the image intelligence side, all our image intelligence target data used to come from JARIC. JARIC is the Joint Air Reconnaissance and Intelligence Center. They were situated at Waterkloof Air Force Base. So those are the main sources. Okay. In terms of aircraft, which the Air Force used to do collection, we had the Impalas, had the F-95 camera pods on, which had either a forward-facing oblique camera. I can't remember if we had a rear-facing oblique camera in it. But then we also had a fan pack, which was a side oblique and a side oblique and a vertical, which gave us a bit of a panoramic view. So that was on the IMPs. We had the Canberra aircraft from 12 Squadron, which were basically used for high-level photography and survey photography and mapping work. 3 Squadron recce flight with the Mirage 3 RZs and R2Zs. They had the Omera 33 cameras in the nose pack, also different configurations, forward-facing, side-facing, also I think rear-facing as well. And then we had the Buccaneers with the Vernon Lorop pod, but that I can speak to you about when I talk to you about my Air Force headquarters career. We always almost had a bit of a oops with that. Then on the Army side, they had the ground forces that used to provide a lot of human intelligence from the patrols and that type of stuff. We didn't have direct access to human intelligence sources per se, but through the intelligence liaison meetings we had with Sector 20, we had a daily intelligence coordination meeting with all the intelligence agencies that were operating in Rundu, just exchanging intelligence. The Air Force was responsible for Air Force intelligence. Okay, so we hardly ever touched any of the ground intelligence. The Navy was responsible for the naval intelligence picture, and the Army was responsible for air intelligence, or ground intelligence, sorry. So it was very clear set domains. So niemand het op mekaar se tone getrap nie. Nobody walked on other people's territory. Otherwise, it would have caused some hassles if we had the Army interpreting Air Force intelligence or Air Force information, and I would not be in a position to interpret ground-based intelligence or ground-based information. It was not my sphere of knowledge. So these are the coordination aspects which we had at Rundu. The first few weeks I got introduced to that. As I said, no IT infrastructure. We had this one computer. It had a very basic word processing application on known as WordStar. Now WordStar, if you wanted to bold something or something, it used to tongue twist your fingers. It used to be Control B, Alt P, whatever. It used to be this weird string. You didn't have just a control function to do something, or what we have in modern stuff, just click on B and it will make it B. So it was a bit of a tongue twister or finger twister to type some stuff. I taught myself some basic word processing skills over there, just writing notes, and then how to enter the data into DBase 3 from the communications intelligence reports. Now getting to the intelligence related stuff. As what you're all aware, by August, September, Operation Modular started in all earnest. Okay, and this was really the last push of the Angolan and Cuban forces and the Russian advisors into southeastern Angola with the objective of occupying Mavinga and Jamba, which were UNITA held territories. The way the Air Force functioned at that stage, for us to build an intelligence picture of knowing when the forces were actually starting to build up and what was going on, we used mainly VHF communications intelligence and HF communications intelligence. So 511, 512, and 513 troop, I might have the wrong troop numbers, but that is what I recall is 511, 512, 513. They used to provide us with these packs and packs of voice and communications intercepts on a daily basis, and it used to be hundreds of pieces of paper, okay, A5 size papers, just with the task number on, the frequency, call sign from, call sign to, what the translation was. Sometimes it just used to be an aircraft call sign, just reporting take departed, sometimes in flight, mid-flight. So throughout the day, I used to go to the signals office and go fetch this stack of paper once every 2 hours or so and just start scanning through them. It was a challenging task, okay. As the time went by, you knew what the task numbers were, which call signs were which, and you could like try and build the flights. So I used to take the flight and you get all the departures. I used to pack down on the floor in front of me on the ground. And then I used to start looking at what stuff was more or less information taking place in a flight or reports in flight, and put all these, try and build the flights with these hundreds of reports. And after that, we had this map in the ops or in the intelligence cell. We used to try and plot the routes on that. After a few weeks of having this process, your mind, you really pick up a lot of stuff. It's amazing how somebody's mind works. You know what information to start discarding. You know what call signs go with which aircraft. You know which pilot numbers. The Angolans and the Cubans were using pilot numbers. So you literally knew which pilot number was flying what aircraft type. where his home base was, what their routine was. As I say, it was just this massive information that you were like trying to suck up into your mind every day. And mentally, you just force yourself to try and build some form of picture by the end of the day to say, this is what happened in our area of responsibility. Now, 320 Air Force, Forwards Air Force Command Post, our intelligence area of responsibility was the 3rd and 6th military region of Angola, which is basically the northern part and the eastern part and southeastern part. Okay. So by the end of the day, I had to write an intelligence summary of what aircraft flew in, what type, their call signs, and then also we knew what aircraft types flew in. And basically looking at the theoretical passenger load and freight load that the aircraft could carry. And I think the Illusion 76s that flew in could carry, I think, like 40 tons of freight and I think 100 passengers or something like that. Then we had the AN-12s that were flying in. We had C-130 flights that used to fly in, mainly from Lubongo and Luanda. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, we used to work out so many flights flew in. Theoretically, the R-76s, if it was 10 flights, they could have flown in 400 tons of cargo. They could have flown in 600 troops. So that we done for aircraft types, which was flying into mainly Quito and Monongwe. And this is how we basically looked at the build-up during March, April, June. This is what led us to believe or built the picture on how the forces were actually building up and that they were actually preparing for the operation to start beginning of October or beginning of August. Sorry. The information basically on a weekly basis. All this information used to go to our dispenser forces. So UNITA was up to date with what was actually happening via our liaison teams, which we had deployed with them. And then on a weekly basis as well, I was taking this information, the detail thereof, to Oshikati. Okay. Now, bar the fact that we used to send daily intelligence reports and intelligence summaries to Oshikati as well and to Western Air Command. The remaining part of my tour was basically just doing comment and liaising with the other forces on a daily basis and getting to learn the operational area. They always say, ken your vyand, know your enemy. Believe me, in the 3 months I spent at the 320 Air Force Command Post, there was a lot of publications. We didn't have access to internet. Well, the internet didn't exist at that stage. There was no Google, there was no nothing. Okay. We literally, whatever we read was read out of books that we'd gained in public libraries, publications that had been sourced from overseas countries during liaison visits, people bringing stuff back. And publications which had been written, for example, in the States or wherever. I know there's a gentleman that wrote a book on Soviet air defense systems, guy with a Eastern European surname, proved very valuable to get an understanding of how the Soviet air defense doctrine worked. Okay. Now, one of the things which we knew is that the FAPA, which was the Air Force of Angola and the air defense capabilities, were very much structured along the Soviet way of doing things. Okay. Now, knowing this, their whole Air Force was run according to Soviet doctrine, if I can call it that, okay, which gave us a bit of an edge and advantage on knowing how they operate. Okay, so we had a bit of, let's say, we could always predict what was busy happening or going to happen, but we had a very good idea of their modus operandi and what to expect. On the air defense side, southeastern Angola or southern Angola, at a stage we believe was one of the most heaviest defended pieces of territory on Mother Earth. We had everything deployed in southern Angola. I can mention some of the anti-aircraft. We had ZPU-1, ZPU-2, ZPU-4s, which were 12.7 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. The next one which we encountered was a ZU-23, which was a 23mm gun. We had the ZU-23-2, which was a twin-barrel 23mm gun. We had the S60, which was, I think, a 57mm gun. We had the KS-19, which I think was 100mm or something like that. So this big piece of cannon which they had. We had the ZSU-23-4 Shilka, which was deployed in theatre. Okay. On the air defense side, excuse me. On the air defense side, we had SAM-2, SAM-3, SAM-6, SAM-7, SAM-8. More about that later. SAM-9, SAM-13, SAM-14, SAM-16. Okay. So we basically had all the equipment that was available to the Russians. I believe they were also field testing it in the conflict in southern Angola. So our Air Force was up against quite an integrated air defense system. It was not easy flying in the area, and the pilots which used to fly across border, very few of their tales have been told, but flying in at 50 foot, doing 500-600 knots, it takes guts, okay, and a lot of respect needs to go to them. A lot of their stories have not been told, and hopefully one day we'll have some more fighter pilots to come and tell their experiences on legacy of what they experienced. Okay, the air defense situation was very strong. It was not an easy area to fly into. We lacked the situation picture with our radar. We basically had two radars, one at Oshakati or Ondangwa, and then during modular, Hooper and Packer, there's another site deployed to Rundu Air Force Base. But basically two sensors, okay, which we had. The Angolans had a complete air defense network, which ranged from, on the SAM-2, they had the Fansong radars, we had spoon race, we had flat face, we had low blow radars, we had square pairs, thin skin, most of the radars which you can, the Landau. There was just numerous radar systems deployed covering the whole southern Angola. So we really flew into a very tightly defended airspace. Fortunately, the intelligence which we had a very good electronic intelligence capability in the Air Force. Bar the fact that we were under embargo, I think our defense industry done a great job in providing us with very good airborne ELINT and COMINT systems. We had a DC-4, which was known as the Spook or the Ghost aircraft, okay, which was a electronic warfare aircraft, or mainly for SIGINT, doing ELINT and COMINT. We had two DC-4s configured like that. And then later in the 1987 era, we had the first Boeing 707s join us in the Air Force as well, providing some more communications, intelligence capability, comms jamming, and that type of stuff. Okay. So on that side, we used a lot of communications intelligence. We had very good knowledge on the ELINT side of the radar operating types. Okay, so we basically knew which times, which sites were on, which sites were off, which sites were on for maintenance. And that also greatly aided in the future planning of strikes onto hostile targets in Angola. Furthermore, during 1987, I pushed a lot of the information we literally just passed on to Oshakati for them to actually start building the intelligence picture and liaising with UNITA. There were very regular liaison visits by the intelligence officer at the unit. They used to fly regularly into Jamba to go and do liaison visits. So that is basically what happened at Rundu. Okay, it was the early build-up of the operation. We basically were involved with the collection, in terms of collection management in the intelligence cycle. Doing collection every day, bringing in comment, bringing in source reports, writing reports. That was my daily life. At the end of June, I had completed my operational tour at 320 Forward Air Force Command Post, and I received the signal transferring me back to my home unit, which was Air Force Base Aster Plant at that stage. On return to Haysterplaat, I had asked on numerous occasions to get involved with 27 Squadron because the maritime intelligence picture also picked my mind quite a lot. It was something different because mainly in the Air Force we were looking at air defense systems, looking at what was happening in Angola and towards the landward side. Okay, and very little was actually being done on the Air Force intelligence side, looking at the maritime side. It was very much left up to the Navy, and trying to give better support to 27 Squadron and 35 Squadron, we actually decided on my return to Haysterplaat to establish a maritime intelligence cell at Haysterplaat to specifically focus on the maritime intelligence domain, supporting our helicopter squadrons, which were embarking on the SAS Tafelberg, operating in the maritime environment, and then most important of all, 27 and 35 Squadron. Okay. So as a young corporal, I was asked whether I am willing to take charge of that, and I ran with it. Okay, I really enjoyed doing new things, taking on new challenges. And we started, myself and one of the national service guys that were there, and we basically started to look at what type of naval intelligence we could get from Silvermine, from the Navy, and then also from other sources. Okay, so we started a small little cell, basically on a daily basis, getting all the information from the Navy and passing that on to 27 Squadron and 35 Squadron for their mission briefings for the East Coast and West Coast harders and the caddy flights which used to take place on a daily basis. The maritime squadrons, now specifically speaking on 27 Squadron, because that's where my knowledge is, we used to have a Albatross aircraft fly between Cape Town and George once every 2 or 3 days. I think we used to call it caddy flights, if I'm not mistaken. There also used to be a aircraft flying from Cape Town to Port Elizabeth, also Albatross, on a daily basis, and then the next day it will fly from Port Elizabeth back to Cape Town. Okay, so we had, on the maritime side, building the shipping picture, we knew very well what was happening on the shipping lane coming past South Africa on a daily basis, with the aircraft transiting east to west on alternate days. Concurrent with that, we had what we called a long East Coast harder. Okay, this was the word or the acronyms we used for the maritime long-range maritime patrol flights. So a long East Coast harder used to be between 5 and 7 days, depending on the weather, where Albatross used to depart from DF Milan, fly to Port Elizabeth, night stop in Port Elizabeth or East London, one of those two cities, depending on which time of day they actually finished their tasks. Fly on the next day to Durban, night stop in Durban, fly to Richards Bay, land in Richards Bay, and I think they night stopped in Richards Bay as well. Back to Durban, and then the route back to Cape Town again. So these flights used to take about 5 to 7 days, depending on the tasking and the weather. Similarly, we had a long East Coast or West Coast harder, which used to be out of Cape Town to Reconnaissance, which was modern day Walvis Bay, for a night stop with the Albatross, and then the following day it used to be from Walvis Bay up to the mouth of the Kanene River and then back to Walvis Bay, and then the day after come back to Haysterplaat. It also be 3, 4, 5 day mission depending on the weather and operational taskings that the guys had. On these flights, we used to monitor or pick up a lot of AGIs, which were active or auxiliary gatherers of intelligence. It was fishing vessels that were fishing, but they were not fishing. Okay, they were fishing for stuff above the water. Okay, so we used to monitor their activities, their concentrations, both on the East Coast and on the West Coast. So I'll speak about that when I speak about 27 Squadron a bit later. After this, I finished my time at Haysterplaat. I was placed on standby again for another week. This time, also to do a special duty tour. This became another 3-day excursion, which became a transfer from Haysterplaat to a unit until further notice. Now, those in the military will understand until further notice, or the UFN acronym on a signal, You could go home in a week, you could go home in 2 weeks, you can go home in 6 weeks, 3 months, 4 months, until whenever you needed. That is when you were going to stay where you were. So my next tour became an until further notice tour, and more about that in episode 3. Koos, thanks for the opportunity thus far, and I look forward to sharing my experiences at 320 Forward Air Force Command Post once again during Operation Modular Hooper and Packer. Then after that, I went back to the Cape. I went to 27 Squadron, or hoped to go back to 27 Squadron for a very short-lived period of time. I was a senior NCO by 1990. I achieved the rank of sergeant, and then got selected to go on to officers course, and that I'll speak about in episode 3, and my career as a last part as an NCO in episode 3, and then the episode 3 also will cover my time as an officer in the Air Force, and maybe also touch a bit on my civilian career up until 2010. Unfortunately, after that, 2010, I can't discuss much. Anyway, thank you. I hope you enjoyed watching. If there's any questions, feel free to pass it on to Koos. The intelligence environment is really interesting. And if there's anything, feel free to ask, and Koos will contact me. But just for now, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Well, Legacy, you know, once again, there's always the invitation for you to come and visit us. It's a time and to record your story with us, even if you cannot visit us. Please come and over and get your story out there. Because the problem we have right now is we're recording here is that some kind of a series or something came out, which once again blackened the name of SADF. And, you know, the thing is, unless people hear the other side, which is your side, they cannot possibly know what to believe, so they're going to take the evidence right in front of them. And if they take the evidence in front of them, guys, then what do? That's when you stand accused and you cannot defend yourself. That is why we have legacy conversations and others, platforms like this one. And that's why I'm asking you, please come and tell your story. Tell your story to us so that we can show the world who you are. And also, guys, you can imagine making these videos takes a lot of time. Not so much for me, which is sit here and listening and recording and engaging with a guest. Kind of nice to do that. But then there's poor old Fossey who sits there where he sits and he has to edit this. And since he hasn't heard it before, he has to listen to it the first time. Sometimes the videos are in different parts, so you have 3 or 4 clips which has to get together, and then you have to listen through it, and then you have to start editing it. Then that edit actually goes to the guest. The guest will listen to it, and he will then tell us, put a kiki, a picture in here, put a picture in here, perhaps a little video that side. So we do that, and that's what he is doing. So I'm asking all of you, the links are here in the description. Buy Fossey a coffee or a whiskey. He likes whiskey, I'm sure. Just buy him a coffee and just help us here to feel a bit appreciated. I can tell you we've been doing this for many years. We don't charge people to do anything. We carry all the costs, the burdens. But it's a burden we would gladly carry. But you know what? It does help us psychologically, at least, if we feel a bit more appreciated. So please like, subscribe, and buy Fossey a coffee. But thanks, guys. God bless. And remember, there will be more episodes of Colonel Voice. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.